People of the Purple Butterfly here, otherwise known as People of 7 on Twitter and YouTube, people are elsewhere on the internet. My soaps are located at purplebutterfly-soaps.myshopify.com and my blog, purplebutterfly-people.blogspot.com. And today I'm here to make some flaxseed fenugreek gel. Someone viewed one of my older videos where I was making this gel, but basically a lot of the information was missing because at the time my aunt had just got diagnosed with dementia, and she was doing all those little dementia things like, "What are you doing?" And she kept putting her face in the camera, and we didn't know she had this issue at the time. You know, she had just got diagnosed. But she's going, let me see, what are you doing? And she kept putting her face in the camera. And then I said, I'm making a video. And she goes, oh, don't put me on the camera. So, of course, everywhere that she was, I had to, cut that part out. I mean, I don't edit, but I do remove content. So, say for instance, people go, oh, let me edit this, let me edit that. No. If there's unwanted content, it's just out of the video. She didn't want her face on camera, so basically the only thing I was left with was a picture of the boiling liquid. And fortunately, there was enough information in that particular clip that you could see what the finished product was going to look like. Well, no, you could just see the boiling. But you got the information on the ingredients. Well, I'm in my own place. There's no distractions. I'm going to remake that video with all the information included, besides the fact that I'm out of gel, so I have to make more anyway. And this one is going to have one extra ingredient. Okay, we're going to start with flaxseed. And as you can tell, this bottle, or container rather, looks like it's been through a war. It's old. The thing about flaxseed, because I bought literally 2 of these things, and I bought the powdered one. I had to use up the powdered one because apparently it doesn't stay as stable as whole flax seeds. So when you go to make flaxseed, use the seeds, whole seeds. Don't use ground. The ground I use for smoothies, so I make sure I ate that up because apparently if you buy them ground, they're good for a month. If you buy the seeds themselves and they're whole, untouched, unground or whatever, they're good for almost a year. Okay, also my fenugreek, I use Germaban brand. It says organic methy seeds. Methy and fenugreek is the same thing. Depending on where you are, that's how they label it. And this time I'm using coriander because coriander is really good for the hair. And it has this sweet type smell. And I'm not sure if I'm going to scent this particular batch, so I figure, why not? And also we'll be using Germaban. You can get this from Brambleberry, which is a soap supply company. This is a broad spectrum preservative. I also have Optifin preservative, which I get from Nature's Garden. But Optifin tends to be expensive, and if you're on a budget, that's not desirable. Now, we also are going to use 2 containers, a skillet and a saucepan. Now, theoretically speaking, and a fine mesh strainer. But theoretically speaking, this is the size that the gel is going to be. But it's been my experience from making this gel for, well, years, that this is the size pan you want to use, because during the process it's going to boil, and because it's flaxseed, it's going to rise, and then you bring it down, then it rises, then you bring it down. If you have a little teeny pan, it's going to rise and overflow. We don't want the overflow. We want to save all those nutrients for our product and not for overflow, which would force you to have to clean up your sink and your floor and all of that. I'm also going to use a funnel. That's going to be later in the process. And an old gel container, which is completely dry except for the top. I'll wipe that out. It's also been scalded, so forth, so on. Now the first thing we'll do, I'm going to move the saucepan out the way. I'm going to put the skillet here. Okay. We're going to use, where are my measuring cups? Hold up. There we go. By the way, because as you can tell, I have, you know, several different types of measuring cups. I have a 1/4 and a 1/2 cup, and I don't know where the rest of them are. So I went to the Dollar Tree. I was looking for measuring cups and measuring spoons, and I found this set for $1. It's got every size. Anyway, I'm going to use the 1 tablespoon size. Yeah. Well, first I'm going to get the darn thing open. They really need to redo these containers, because at least I got it open without having to sweep the floor this time. But usually it goes like this and everything pops. I got that from Kroger's. If I see another type of flaxseed, well, another type of container for flaxseed, I'll use that. But I'm going to put 3 tablespoons in here. Mainly because I want this to be an extra strength gel. You can get away with using 1 tablespoon and you get the same effect, because you're only using like a cup of water. Let me put that up where it goes. Okay. I'm going to use a tablespoon of coriander, because coriander is powerful, so you don't want to use more than that. And it also escapes if you don't put it directly over what you want it to come out of, because those little seeds will get everywhere. Okay, and I'm going to use an equal amount of fenugreek. Now the skillet thing is mainly for the fenugreek, because fenugreek, if you don't prime it first, they will grow, and you'll look up and you'll have stuff sprouting. We want to kill the germination action of the fenugreek. I'm going to put the seeds, the flax seeds and the coriander in the saucepan, because I only really need to prime the fenugreek. It always smells like pancake syrup. Other people say that it smells like curry to them. I'm not real sure what curry smells like. I'm thinking that's a Ayurvedic term or Indian cooking term, because that's where those ingredients would be used. And the only Indian food I know of is tandoori chicken. And tasted good the one time I had it until it started, you know, having issues because apparently I'm allergic to whatever's in there. I'm thinking it might have had iodine because I'm allergic to iodine. Now I'm going to need a tablespoon of oil. So let's use campfire this time. The oil is completely optional. I'm only using it because this is a non-stick skillet, and if you know anything about non-stick skillets, if you don't want to use a non-stick skillet naked. You add heat to a non-stick skillet and there's no liquid or oil or whatever, and your skillet can actually flake, and that will destroy it, and that won't be good. So I'm just going to use a little splash. No, there's more than a splash, but yeah. But I'm going to use a little splash of the oil, just so that way when I prime the seeds, I don't have to worry about it ruining my skillet. And the oil is not really going to make a big difference in the finished product. In fact, it might completely cook away. Now, let me find my favorite spatula. Because one thing you don't want to do is fool around with fenugreek without, you know, a spatula or a spoon or something that you're not, you know, getting it on your hands. Now, you notice I put that in there cold. I'm getting everything towards the center of the pan. No particular reason, I just do it that way so that way the oil can have some place to go. And now I'm going to turn this on high. Well, while I'm doing that, I'm going to take my distilled water and pour like 2 cups in it. And I think I'll just go ahead and dump that in the flaxseed coriander combo. And since there's just water, I'll put that cup right back on the drain there. I had to double check. Sometimes I go turn on the stove and I end up turning on the wrong one, which is another reason it's good to have the water already in there, because that way if I turn on the wrong one, I don't have to worry about it ruining my skillet or my pan. Now, here's something a lot of people don't know about fenugreek, especially when you go to prime it. And I usually prime it in a cast iron skillet, but I don't want to take out a cast iron skillet just for a couple of tablespoons of fenugreek. Get yourself a top, because as soon as the heat hits it, especially if you use oil, it's going to do a popcorn effect. You'll have little fenugreeks going. Trust me, if one of those pop out and hit you, it's going to burn and it's going to hurt a lot. So basically, you're going to wait till it does the I'm starting to pop thing, and then you're going to cover it up. And then basically you're going to give it a minute so that way it can kill off the germination process. Just for a reference, is this color. When you're done with the priming, it's going to look almost like the flax seeds. It's going to be browner. That smells wonderful. It's starting to come to a boil. Well, the bubble. So I'm going to go ahead and put the top on it. And basically, well, depending on how sensitive the microphone is, you're going to hear the But while I'm thinking about it, I want some coffee. There we go. You hear that? It's like a sizzle type effect. At that point, I'm going to turn it off. Stir it around a little. You hear it? Sounds like popcorn almost. I'm trying to show you the color, but that's not going to be possible with the oil. So I'm going to bring the entire camera over. Let me let you see that way. See that color? That color change tells you that it's basically ready to go to the next step. Because when it turns that color, that means it's literally cooked off all the stuff in there that is going to cause germination and all that. And now I'm going to move that off of the heat. I'm going to turn this onto a boil. And remember I told you fenugreek has like a popcorn effect? You can see the seeds have popped onto the top or the lid of the skillet. So the next thing I'm going to do, like I said, we don't need much of the oil. It's barely going to be used. I could pour the whole thing in there. I'm just going to go ahead and drain it. And get my face out the way in case it wants to do that popping thing, which it did. Okay. So now we have this deep tan color. It's almost the color of the flax seeds now. And that sound you hear is the oil interacting with the water. But for the most part, the oil has been completely strained off. It's not always well. I only use like a half a tablespoon or so, just a splash. Now stir that. Bring it to a boil. Don't get rid of the fine mesh strainer. That's going to be important later in this process. In the meantime, we're done with this part. I'm just going to go ahead and put the top on this. Well, actually, I'm going to scrape these little pieces of fenugreek off, because we want to save all that goodness. Yeah. Doesn't necessarily want to come off the lid, but if I slam it a few good times, it'll pop down. But in the meantime, we're going to bring that to a boil. I'm going to go ahead and give it a stir. If you do this, you'll notice that the flaxseed goes to the bottom. The fenugreek, after it's been primed, goes to the bottom. If you put fenugreek and water in here like this, the fenugreek might float to the top. If you prime it, it goes to the bottom. The coriander is floating at the top because that's what coriander does. You could either stick the coriander through a blender or just use them whole. Since we're boiling this, whole is okay. So yeah, By the way, you see the definition in my curls? That's because of the gel we're making here. Yeah. Excuse me. So we're going to let this come to a boil. And then we're going to take the top off of it and let it come to a rolling boil. I only had the top one here to concentrate the heat so it boils faster. Then, when it comes to a boil and starts to rise up, we're going to move it to another burner that's completely cold, so that way it can calm down. Then we're going to bring it to a boil, let it rise up, move it to, take it off the heat basically, let it calm down. We're going to do that 3 times, okay? If you just let it cook and cook and cook, and it boils, and then you just boil it for 10 minutes or whatever, it can, well, basically explode or overflow or whatever. So that's what we don't want, okay? It's boiling. And just to be sure, I'm going to stir it. And since it's boiling, I'm going to take the lid off and let it come to a rolling boil. You get all these little fenugreeks out of here. Man, that smells amazing. So I went through all that for one little flaxseed that was stuck on the lid. I'm weird that way. There. It's at a rolling boil. That's why I use 2 cups of water, because by the time we're done, we might end up with 1 cup of usable product. Let me move this out of the way. When it boils, it tends to boil up, and that's when you're going to move it. Then you're going to bring it back to a boil and move it. See, right now it's right here. When it boils up to this point, that's when I'm going to move it over. See, what that's doing, the flax makes this substance called mucilage, which is the sticky, gooey, jelly substance that is the basis of the gel. So we want to encourage that mucilage to develop, and when you bring it back to the boil, it intensifies, and when you bring it back to the boil, it concentrates, so you end up with a gel that's a gel. Otherwise, you're just going to end up with a sticky soup. You know. The best way to describe it, have you ever seen okra? When you cook it, it makes this slime. That's called mucilage. That's what we're utilizing. Flaxseed has a naturally occurring mucilage. Okra, that stuff makes the best hair gel, and it makes your hair grow, but okra is seasonal. So basically, if you have okra, that's great and astounding, but basically you can only get okra like 2 times out the year. We're going to let that calm down from the boil. And it's turned a murky brown. And that's the good thing about this gel. It turns a dark color. It'll turn brown, well, depending on how much flaxseed and how much fenugreek. You can also end up with one that's a pale tan. But because of what it is, and it doesn't have any natural colorants or, you know, pigmentation, it's not going to affect your hair color, which is why I use it, because hello, pink hair. I've used so many products that have, I mean, like when I was using coffee oil, which is real good for your hair, it turned my pink this dingy brown pink color that I couldn't stand. So I switched that up with caffeine tablets, grounded those down to a powder, and turned that into oil and went on about my day. Didn't affect my hair color. Okay, it's coming to a second boil. And now it's making a pocket sound. And you don't have to stir it. I just do. I'm used to stirring whatever I cook. In fact, there are some recipes that says leave undisturbed. In other words, don't stir it. I fail that test every time. That's like when they tell you to put the cover over rice and let it cook for 20 minutes undisturbed. Yeah, because when you stir the rice or disturb it during that process after the simmer, it'll get sticky. And yeah, I've ended up with sticky rice on more than one occasion because I can't seem to resist that stirring thing. Okay, it's coming to a rolling boil. When it boils, by the way, after the bubbles, it gets like this white cast on it. That's actually what you want. Let me see if I can get close enough to get you a picture of it. See those white bubbles? That's the mucilage. Okay. And that's what you want. Make sure you can actually see. There we go. Now sometimes when they say don't disturb, don't stir, I go like this, which kind of has a similar effect without having the effect, if that makes sense. I think I'm actually going to cover that, just so it intensifies that heat without losing too much of the water, because water will dissipate in the steam. But that means I also have to look real close, because if I see it rising, to a certain point, then it's time to put it on the burner that's not in use, because we don't want to overflow or spill out the pan. Whoa. Okay, calm yourself down. Now, if you notice, I have I should mention, get a container that's bigger than the amount that you're using. So that way when you strain it, the seeds and everything will be in here and the product will be in here. And the container I'm using is going to be here. There might be actually a little bit extra that I can, put in a different container, but this is my main gel container, so yeah. In case you don't have a container like this, you can get one at the box store or whatever, or just take an old container that you had gel in, peel off the label. That's what I did, and that way you already have a container. Okay. Of course, my mixture has a little teeny bit of oil floating on the top of it, for the simple fact of the oil that I use to prime the fenugreek. That will completely mix into the finished product, which is only beneficial to your hair since it's safflower oil, and safflower oil is real good for the hair. Okay. And then when you strain it, it'll look like water. It'll be really watery until time passes and it cools, because the mucilage will thicken up, so forth, so on. When it cools, let me find my digital thermometer. When it cools, you're going to get it down to 140 degrees. So I always aim for 130, because you have to have it down to 130 Well, 140. But it has to be under 140 so that way you don't kill off the broad spectrum preservative. That's at 213. 212 is boiling, so 213 is a rolling boil. Fahrenheit, by the way. I don't know what that would be for Celsius, but I'm just letting you know. But can you see the steam coming off of there? Yeah, that's all water that would have been escaping if I hadn't put the top on it. Well, hold on. Let me see if you can hear that. It's actually making a bloop, bloop, bloop sound. You hear that? That's from the boiling. Now we're going to let that calm down some. Now when you use this, you're only using 15% of your total volume. Translation, I'm going to use a tablespoon of this when it's time. Usually when I put the Germaban or the preservative in it, I also put a fragrance oil with it. This is going to be unscented, so when I put it in there, it's just going to be this. But that's going to be, at least an hour from now, because we want it to cool down, and we want it to cool down naturally. We don't want to stick it in the refrigerator or whatever to speed up the process, because that will kill off the mucilage effect, which basically will mean your gel won't be gel. We want the gel to gel. That didn't make sense, but you know what I mean. Hold on a second. Let's see if I can get this in the camera better. Yeah. And the bubbles are white, is rising. It's making a lot of noise for the boil. And that's been at least 3 times. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. Well, actually, let me bring you closer so you can see. See how thick that done got? Yeah. Now, by the way, if you do this with a plastic cup or plastic container, make sure that the code is PP or HDPE, so that way you know it's strong enough to withstand boiling liquid, because you don't want to use this in some flimsy plastic container that's going to melt straight through, because yeah, trust me, that's a bummer when that happens. Now I'm going to strain this. And when you do this, do not throw away these seeds. Put it in a Ziploc or a ice cube tray, because you can reuse this like 2 or 3 times. That's the good thing about fenugreek and flax seeds. Well, natural ingredients in particular. It's not a one of, you know. You could reuse stuff. Because just because it released the mucilage enough for gel once doesn't mean that it's done. You can, it'll be a weaker gel, but it'll still turn into a gel at the end of the day if you do it again. Go ahead and mix this. necessary. It's just my process. It keeps stuff from being sticky and icky and all that. Now, I'm gonna let that continue draining. But I want you to see the flax seeds and hold on, I'll just bring it over. You see how much thicker they got? And all puffy and everything? That's because of the fenugreek. The fenugreek swells up in water, especially if it's boiled water or if you leave it overnight. Because it's releasing its nutrients and stuff like that. And that's also why you want to make sure you cook the fenugreek first, because if you just leave it in water, especially for a couple of days or overnight, or if you leave the fenugreek in your solution, like when you make a fenugreek spray, people have been surprised. They look up and their fenugreek seeds are sprouting. And fenugreek sprouts are really good when you're using them for food, but if you're using it for making a hair product or a face product or, you know, a soap, that can be annoying. It's like, why is my stuff growing? We don't want it to grow. Okay. Now, the current temperature of this is 162. So we have about 20 degrees to go. So I'm gonna give it 30 degrees. So I'm going to bring you back. I'm gonna let this sit here so that way it can finish draining, because, you know, even though it's not draining much, most of the liquid has been poured off. It's wet, which means there's still some drops or two that will come out and become part of the finished product. So I will bring you back. This has been People7 on Twitter and YouTube, People elsewhere on the internet. My soaps located at PurpleButterfly soaps.myshopify.com, my blog PurpleButterfly people.blogspot.com. Just in case, you know, the video turns off, because even when I put it on pause, so that way I can come back, if the phone rings or whatever, it's going to zap it, and then I'll have to use U-Cut to connect the two together, which in itself is annoying. That's about as close as I get to editing, though. See you in a minute. Okay, we're back. It's been about 20 minutes. I'm at 121 degrees, which makes it safe to add the broad spectrum preservative. In the meantime, I took the time to label the Ziploc, well, not Ziploc, the zipper bag with fenugreek, flaxseed, coriander seeds for hair gel. I specifically wrote for hair gel so that way it doesn't get confused when it's in the freezer, because I use flaxseed and coriander for other things. Fenugreek is edible. There are people in my family that would think, oh, she made a tea, and they'll go ahead and take the liberty to brew them some tea. And that works, but I can't do fenugreek internally because it's also a natural blood thinner. A lot of people don't know that. And if you happen to be on blood thinners, and I'm on Xarelto and Plavix, that could cause me all kinds of issues, you know. And I'm not gutsy enough to go off my blood thinners to strictly use fenugreek. I'm not willing to take the risk because, you know, I've had several issues. I mean, hello, I'm a stroke patient twice. I've had TIAs. I've had pulmonary embolisms and stuff. And then I looked up in the video and it turns itself off. That's annoying. Anyway, this is my finished product. Before it can thicken up too much, I'm just going to go ahead and pour this in. Wow. As you can see, that filled it up. Which is why I put more than I needed in there when I said this was going to be the size of my finished container. Because 2 cups of water boils down to less than 1. Now, if I was making a large batch, I would have used an even bigger saucepan. Oh yeah. One thing I like about gel containers is those grooves make it harder to, and that is our finished product. Yep. Now I'm going to take something and write flaxseed gel on here. A lot of times, especially if I change the ingredients, and you want to remove the permanent mark or whatever, you can use alcohol or you can use a nail polish remover, and that gives you the clean surface so you can write another label. This has been People7 on Twitter and YouTube, People elsewhere on the internet. My soaps located at PurpleButterfly-Soaps.myshopify.com. My blog, PurpleButterfly-People.blogspot.com. Y'all stay blessed. Bye now.